Over in the Scrutiny Committee, Wednesday, 6th of September. We have a heavy agenda, so if we can keep comments and questions short, that would be appreciated, because we have a lot to get through. But we have a lot of officers present as well. So we've got the Director, Resource Director, Communities here. We've got Head of Development as well to answer questions. So we have other officers as well to bolster as we go through the agenda. As preamble, please phones to mute or vibrate. It saves interruptions and disturbances. Fire drill, no fire drill is expected tonight. So if the fire alarm goes, it's for real. You know where the fire exits are, they're clearly indicated. Item 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence. Councillor Circus is unwell, I believe. Do we have anyone else?
I have apologies from Councillor Sam Bateman, Councillor John Campbell, Councillor Liz Kitchen, in addition to Councillor Circus.
Item 2 is minutes. Basically looking to approve as correct the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of September 2024. Essentially, any comments or questions should have been raised before, but might have been missed. Otherwise, if everybody's content, I assume everybody's read the minutes. Are there any comments or corrections? Otherwise, I would look for a proposer and a seconder to approve these minutes. Councillor Livingston, Councillor Walters, thank you. Is everybody in agreement to approve the minutes? Thank you. I will sign the minutes, so there'll be just a small hiatus. Oh, and somebody else, were you here? Councillor Jeffrey, thank you, Councillor Walters. Thank you. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest or conflicts of interest to be declared at this time? If not, we will proceed to item 4 on the agenda. I was going to say, if other councillors or cabinet members wish to join the table, if they can find themselves a slot, they're welcome to join the table, or they're welcome to stay where they are as they wish. But feel free if you want to come and join. Item 4, announcements. Item 5, proposed meeting time for Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 15th of January, as intimated just now. Due to the local plan examination taking place during December and January, and meeting room availability and timings, it is proposed to move the next ONS committee meeting to the 15th of January 2025 for a 6:30 p.m. 18:30 start. This item needs to come to you as a committee to be agreed, and I would propose that we vary the time of the meeting to 6:30, 18:30. And can I have a seconder? And can we have a vote, please? Councillor Grant, thank you. Is everyone in agreement? Thank you. Item 6, there's a report. A report on the council's finance and performance Q2, and also to receive a report from the head of finance. I'd like to thank Dom, Director of Resources, and Samuel, his trusty sidekick, to come and go through the numbers in the presentation. And I'm sure you'll be well prepared to answer any questions. And I hope if you've, as I said, with the long agenda. Unfortunately, Dom didn't receive many questions before the meeting, so we'll take it like that. And I'll hand over to Dom. Thank you, Dom.
Well, actually, it's probably the other way around. I'm probably the sidekick, so I'm going to hand over straight away to Sam.
Okay, so I'll start with the finance items, and then I'll hand over to my sidekick, who will cover the performance. As Chair just said, we have received some questions in advance, which both of us will address during the presentation of the report. I'll start with revenue. So there are budget pressures in parking income due to a change in customer behaviour on the purchase of day tickets, as a result of the price increase, which has meant that we are forecasting not to meet the full year income budget. I'm pleased to say that commercial waste has recovered some of its income that was previously reported as below budget last meeting. And other areas of pressure are strategic planning consultancy, which is on a vacant post, as well as a local plan examination. Offsetting these overspends, there's additional income from investment property following rent reviews and new lets, as well as additional income from treasury investments. And then there are budget savings from vacant posts and development and a reduction in the cost of HVO fuel. But again, there's a risk that the price will go up. But at the moment, we're not expecting that. The pay award has now been agreed since the end of September, and is less than budgeted, which has created a budget saving of 400k overall. And officers are forecasting a £130,000 revenue surplus for the full year. I'll move on to capital. So spend on the programme is 29.8% at month 6, which is in line with the same period last year. Full year forecast is 83.3% or £12.7 million. Some delays to projects which are not within the council's control, such as setbacks to housing development sites and waiting for information from external parties. But there are some delays due to internal capacity whilst officers focus on the office move. And lastly, debts. So debts over 90 days remain high, and they still relate to a handful of larger developers. The regular meetings still take place between finance, legal, and action is being taken on those. And if there are any questions before we move on to performance.
Just a very quick question, Chairman. The budget last week, the government said it was going to increase employers' national insurance contributions. What impact does that have, if any, on our budget, please?
Well, a rough calculation would be about £500,000 in extra employers' contributions. What we don't know at the moment is how much funding we will get against that and how they will calculate that, and whether that would be in our core, as part of our core sort of funding, so in place of something else that we would have got, or whether it's in addition. So, and we'll probably only find that out when we get the settlement, so which will be the week just before Christmas, probably.
Any other questions? Councillor Len Ellis Brown.
Thank you, Chair. On the item 1.1, the parking, we've identified a loss of income against the budget. But is some of that offset against people buying their tickets earlier, the season tickets earlier? So it's not always that taken consideration in that figure, in the loss?
So we've done some analysis. The usage of the car parks hasn't dropped, but there was a peak in February and March, or January and February last year, when the budget report went out about the increase on the day pass. So people bulk bought in last year, which has impacted the income this year.
Subsequent question, if I may. Have we done analysis then to say, although we're putting, sorry, nearly got away with it, sorry, don't give me that look either. Have we done analysis to show that we've anticipated increase in revenue due to an increase in the parking fee, but have we now done analysis to say, actually, we might not hit that figure because people are going to, their purchasing patterns may change, i.e. buying season tickets rather than paying on a daily basis?
Yes, because we've identified people are buying quarterly season tickets instead of, as well as bulk buying day passes, quarterly season ticket has increased
But
as
the
well.
purchase of those tickets is not going to impact what the predicted revenue from those car parks over the next 12 months.
No.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Livingston.
Just a quick one. The 90-day debtors, you said there's some court action taking place in October. Did that actually go ahead?
I can intervene there and say that luckily we have Emma Parks, head of development here. And so between Sam and Emma, they can cover that topic because I raised it as well.
Yes, well, yes. In terms that there was a bundle that went, and one of the debtors did pay before it went to the court action, so it was successful, and then the others are now in the process, is my understanding.
Just more generally, in terms of breaking down those debts, some of them are actually paying in instalments, so we are recovering those costs. So whilst it shows as a debt, we've got a payment plan with them and they're being recovered. Others, as my colleague said, are subject to legal action in the process at the moment, and others are being referred to legal. So there are some that are in hand. So it's not, you know, a number that are actively being recovered, and others where action is being pursued. Thank you.
Any other questions on that topic? Any other questions from councillors? No? I think I've got off lightly. Next item.
Shall I move on to performance? Yeah, I'll move on to that. So last time we reported 7 items in the red. Sorry, correction, 6 items in the red. It should have been 7. So apologies for that. We reported, or misreported rather, the quality of recycling as being green against the target. It was actually, we used the June figure, I think, rather than the average for April, May and June. So it was actually red against that figure. So actually we're comparing 7 there, 7 reds from last time. If I move on to this quarter, we've got 8 reds. So we're increasing 1. The good news, I suppose, is that the ambers have gone down and the greens have actually gone up. So if I just sort of summarize the key areas of change, if you like. In revenues and benefits, which I see as, you know, probably some of the more important indicators. The quality assurance, you know, the subsidy claim error is still red. The value has come down. It was previously 1%. It's now hovering around 0.54%, which is just on the threshold of losing money over the upper threshold. But that's obviously the pre-audit figure. So there is very little headroom there. It's unlikely to create enough headroom if we don't find any more, you know, of the larger errors that we found at the start of the year. We're still unlikely to get that headroom. So should errors be identified during the audit of those figures, it's still likely to result in a subsidy loss. So there's no change there. It's heading in the right direction. We aren't finding, the similar ones to the two that we originally found, one from census and one from COVID. But it does mean that, it's still going to be red. It's going to be red at the end of the year. We're likely to lose subsidy there. We have had another data breach in revenues and benefits. There was a process change, and one of the templates wasn't updated sufficiently. It resulted in a very small amount of data incorrectly being disclosed. We've reported this to the Information Commissioner's Office. We've taken action to address that. They have sort of agreed with our sort of conclusion that we don't need to take any further action. And obviously we've checked other processes where we're changing things to make sure that we're not doing that similar mistake that happened. But obviously that has now, caused an issue there within that service, and we're reporting it as such as red in that quarter. Of the other indicators, we've got two new indicators that have turned red in the quarter. One is payments made online. And so the percentage of online payments fell as we undertook some transitional work from an old platform, if you like, to a new platform, a new system, which took much longer than expected. It was quite complex when we started opening up and changing over. People were unable to make online payments of things like bin orders and bulky bags. That had to be done via the customer services phone line. But our expectation is that now, the new platform is online, it's all working again. It's a blip. We expect that to be bouncing back to online payments meeting the target again. But obviously it didn't do while that system was offline. And the final, I suppose, new red indicator is health and wellbeing interventions. We had a vacancy and some holiday being taken over the summer, which meant that we didn't deliver the number of interventions that we thought we were going to. The good news again is that the vacancy is now filled, and we expect that indicator to bounce back as well and turn green as the number of services that we deliver then is increased to the target. And obviously I don't want to dwell on just on the negative ones. There have been two that have turned from red to green, which I think is also worth a comment specifically. So the quality of recycling, which was red, well, it was actually reported as green, it was red, is now actually green. And I have double checked that we are using the right figures this time, which is good. We've had a lowest rate that I think we've had for a while of only a 5% sort of contamination rate in August. Obviously, this is partly the work of us and county communicating to residents about the importance of clean recycling. But it's, there'll be an element of, fortune, and I'm sure, it's one of these that is easily changed with a bit of rain and our contamination rate will go up. So, it's green for now. And then the other one, which I think is certainly worth highlighting, is households in bed and breakfast. And the team in housing have really worked hard and very successfully to reduce the numbers in bed and breakfast. They are having, luckily, we have the head of housing with us who probably give a much better explanation, but he's very kindly provided some words in the report. But I think they're worth repeating here. They are changing the ways that they're doing things. They've been introduced, weekly meetings to review plans. They're using, the legislation to refer back and push back where we can. There's more scrutiny and sign off and improved communications that are really changing the way that we're dealing with this. It has helped as well that something like the Turpit Court has come online. It's reduced the numbers in temp and therefore in B&B as well. The B&B number is low, but there are still, I think, 16 or so still in B&B. So it's not finished yet, but it's certainly going in the right direction thanks to the actions being taken. So I think that's worth a mention as well. And that was all I was going to sort of draw out for you. So
thank you, Dom. Any questions from members? Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. Obviously, we've mentioned another data breach. Just a question on that. Essentially, are we looking at introducing any further checks to introduce a safeguard against further incidents? And if so, what are they?
I think when one of these incidents happens, we always have a inquisition as to how it's happened and trying to avoid it in the future. There was a change in the template which didn't quite go through into the actual process. So we have now set the alarm that when we do make a change to a template or a process, that we check for that before we do anything. And we also have checked other items like that. So where something goes wrong, we make sure that previously have we continued to do that. When we're using a process and a system, nothing's infallible. And sometimes it's an unintended consequence that you make a change over here and it has an impact somewhere else. So we can't guarantee that we won't make another error like that, but we're much more likely to think about that impact somewhere else now we've had that breach.
Some of the council raised that, Councillor Taylor.
So yes, we did look at it. Yes, it has had some impact. I don't think it's clearly not had quite enough of an impact. So it is something we are continuing to look at. And it would be nice, wouldn't it, for the public to be able to do things better online. So some of it is about actually lining up the online so it's easy to use and seamless. And obviously that isn't necessarily an easy and quick thing to be able to do. So we are in phase 2 or 3 of a 5 or 6, 10 phase process. So we're stepping in the right direction and continuing to make it as easy as possible for people to do things online where they can, as opposed to talking to someone.
Councillor Bevis.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very encouraged to see the reduction in people in temporary accommodation. Obviously, we had to wait a long time for Turpit Court to become available through no fault of our own. But to see that has now significantly reduced the numbers is encouraging. I just wondered whether it says there's 6 units that haven't been let. Would that mean that we get a slight increase again in a slight reduction in the number of people in temporary accommodation if those are used for that purpose?
I think that'll be tackled by Andrew Smith.
Thank you, Councillor. No, they have been let. There was an issue over, I think, a sewage diversion, which they seemed to address much quickly than they thought. There was a fear that we wouldn't be able to let them occupy them until January, but they are all now let. So the whole scheme is up and running.
So does that mean we'll see a slight decrease in the number in the next report?
Well, I hope so. And I think that the decrease in the numbers in bed and breakfast are due to a number of things. So Turpit Court has certainly helped because we've been able to move people out of our sort of temporary accommodation stock into their settled homes, and then people out of sort of bed and breakfast. But the way the teams have worked together much more consistently and put in new measures to ensure that fewer people go into bed and breakfast for less time. And I think that really has been the major thing that will carry on going. And I'm hoping there will be a spike in January. I need to remind members of that. In winter months, you always get more in homeless, but I'm hoping to see overall that trend going down. If we ever get to no numbers in B&B, I'll send you all an email.
Councillor Ellis-Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to the point about abandonment rates. I know the KPIs are currently under review and discussions about that. I wondered if we would consider time to abandonment as a better measure, because just having a figure that this is the number of calls that have been abandoned might be time to abandonment might be a better measure.
So yes, we've talked about this before, haven't we? And that is in the background being thought about how we change that indicator to a better one. So yes, thank you.
Councillor Belinda Walters.
Thank you, Chairman. My question is about the focus on online. I would, in my own personal world and in my job, there are some people who just will not be able to ever access online, and I'm always concerned when we have 100% focus on online only without the support of telephone-based inquiry system that sits parallel with it.
Yeah, yes. So to stop any alarm bells, this is about people who can do things online, choosing to use the phone, where actually we should be directing them to online. Those that can't do things online, we would always keep that customer service open. But actually, those that are able to do it online but choose not to are clogging it up for those that actually could be better dealt with by a phone call. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a follow-up question to the point Dom just made to Belinda's question. Excuse my ignorance, but how do we know who's capable of using online services and who's not? How are we measuring that?
Very difficult to answer that question. How do you know? We don't. People can say anything though, can't they, on the telephone? So you can ask them, could you do this online? And they can just say, no, I want to talk to someone. Are they able to do it? We just need to make it easier for people not to have to wait on a phone call and just be able to just do things easily online and encourage them to do so.
Any other questions? I did raise a number of questions, specifically on page 30 and 31. And luckily we've got Emma Parks here looking at the new KPIs on development. And certainly my questions on that was along the lines of when you look at the measurements, just to understand them better. Because when you look at the proportion of EOTs requested as against the number of applications submitted, I mean, we tend to measure inclusive of extension of time as a positive thing. And I just wondered if we are measuring things like how many applications that we get, and when we ask for an extension of time, is it us or is it them? So maybe, Emma, if you could expand a bit on these new KPIs, please.
Sure. So these KPIs are national KPIs and have been in place for some significant period of time, and they're just rolling over a 2-year period. So the national KPIs at the moment include extensions of time. And so that's what's reported. There was a consultation pre the elections that they were going to change the national KPIs. And that's still our expectation, or there is no date or any further information in terms of a response to that consultation. But we are working at reducing our reliance on extensions of time, monitoring why applications go out of time and with reasons. Is it committee? Is it consultation? Is it workload, etc.? So we can really then pinpoint where we need to work to the majority of applications, certainly for minors, being determined within the time frame of 8 weeks. Majors is a bit more complex because 13 weeks was set a long time ago, and it doesn't necessarily reflect the complexity of majors. So I think our focus at the moment is on householders and more minor developments, and we'll need to wait to see what the government says around majors and whether they are going to make us determine them within a certain percentage without extensions of time, because I think that will be challenging nationally. Thank you.
Thank you. It was my concern really about resource planning and making sure that we can meet the changes, if any. Councillor Ellis-Brown, do you want to?
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning that there's not a single council in the country that would achieve the targets without extension of time. That's information provided by the Local Government Association and PAS. So we're not alone here. Every council is dependent on extension of time.
Thank you, but I still wanted to know what the numbers were. Any other questions on this topic? No. We'll move on.
Yeah. Sounds good.
So we'll move on to the annual plan then.
I'm about to say annual plan a lot. This is the course, there's a full update this quarter of the whole of the annual plan. So in summary, there are 88 actions in the plan, 15 have been completed, there are 70 in progress and 3 haven't commenced yet. Those that have completed this quarter include working with registered providers to identify and secure alternative temp accommodation, which is reflected in the KPIs, reviewing the success of the wider Horsham district, delivering a large free community event and holding a jobs and skills fair to find opportunities for upskilling and employment. Then there are 3 projects that are not in the annual plan, but they're considered major, so we've provided an update on those. That's the Gatwick Airport, the office move, and it's in the report. 1 second, sorry, the the PRS update to the planning system. Any questions on those?
Any questions of Sam on this particular topic? No? No. That's right. We'll move on past item 8 to item 9, which is Horsham Parks, Fields and Trust.
So just doing the half yearly review.
Oh, you want to stick it?
That's the draft and
Yeah, well, before we move on, we'll do the draft annual plan for you, Sam.
That's okay. Sorry, I was doing the update and then the annual
I thought
plan.
you were leaving.
No, I'm not leaving. I've got a presentation.
Okay.
So I've got 11 slides. I've been working on the annual plan updates, and I've summarised new items for the 25-26 plan into several slides. But maybe everyone can see them. So before I go through them, this is the draft plan. It's the draft plan that's going to cabinet in a couple of weeks' time, and the wording may be changed or updated between this the draft plan and the final plan. So I've summarised them. Right. So on supporting people and communities, we have got cost of living, implementing council tax reduction, and leisure and arts. There's some items there, so we're going to make improvements to the capital. I'm not going to run through them all. A new cultural strategy, and then on completion of the overview and scrutiny task and finish group work on women and girls in sport. What the actions from that, we will put that into the annual plan. Housing. So explore and investigate additional housing through modular homes, the rent reform bill, Awab's law, which is living conditions and making that known into the rented sector. And then another overview and scrutiny task and finish group is the battery storage. So whatever findings come from that will be in the final annual plan. And then community, there's 3 items there: safety event, community hall at Highwood, design a community hall, and then South Ponds Playground. Does anyone have any questions? I'll do it on supporting people and communities, because that's the last slide there.
Chairman, can we have a copy of those slides? They'll be very useful.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any questions for Sam before she moves on? No? Okay, next chapter.
Next chapter is inspiring greener futures. So these are grouped into, so we've got carbon reduction items. So here we've got removing gas boilers in Park House and Park Street, completing decarbonisation works in Fines Court flats, surveys of council owned leisure centres, solar panels, and appraise options on how the council can offset remaining carbon emissions. The theme is nature, so introducing planting species to Highwood Hill, cycling and walking, there's 3 items there, non-motorised access in Billingshurst and Bishopbrooke, and local supporting local communities who want to prepare walking cycling strategy. The last one on inspiring green futures. So there's I've linked this up into communications. So there's lobbying government there, facilitating training to businesses on to focus on green principles, green grants or greener grants, launching a campaign, and then we've got the food waste. Can't go through without mentioning food waste. Any questions on anything in that inspiring greener futures?
Any comments from councillors? I do have one comment. I didn't know that Southern Water would think about bringing in smart meters. It's news to
I
me.
think it was lobbying. Yeah,
Oh, it's just lobbying.
yeah, lobby government to allow production that they've put into effect.
I think this is, so you'll be aware of the Crawley Home study, so I assume this is in relation to those that they have measures which can be put in place. And we're aware the provider there has rolled it out in conjunction with water companies across the country. But for some reason there's a slight block here with Southern Water, and so I think we really want to try and unlock that so they can be rolled out within those properties and enable water efficiency and savings to take place. Thank you.
Any questions or comments? Oh, Councillor Walters.
Sorry, I'm just being a bit dim here. This is to support the fact that we're only letting households have so many litres per day, so which will then go, sorry, it's
That's not my understanding. No, it's just a general measure that could be input into any homes I think, you know, it could be an optional matter. You know, if a water company promotes it, you could say, I want this installed, because essentially you save water and you save money on your bills if you're metered. So
sorry, is this separate then? I mean, I've got a smart meter. So is this separate to having a smart meter? So you've got something that restricts the water going into the home as well as a meter actually measuring it?
yes.
Thank you so much.
No worries. Any other questions? Finish them. Right. No worries.
Build a thriving local economy. So under this theme, we've got businesses, so investigating or helping out additional startup units, companies with units, seeking opportunities for co-working venues, an economic development group, a growth deal with Horsham Enterprise Park, South Water, Mowbray and Billingshurst. We've got the Gatwick Diamond Strategic Economic Partnership, and then promotion of Horsham Enterprise Park as key strategic employment site. Employment, we've got building on the success of the job fairs, deliver focused skills fairs, working with county on a careers hub, and working with partners to support underemployed groups of people into jobs. And the last one on building a thriving local economy is place. So start to implement the improvements in the Bishopric, consult on public realm improvements in Black Horse Way, consult on infrastructure improvements in Billingshurst, extend the Shared Prosperity Fund programme, and they deliver Plate Up Local and public transport provision at strategic sites there. Any questions on that?
Councillor Nolan,
I think your first slide in this chapter was that the Economic Development Group. Will that come from a cost across the district and not be sort of Horsham centric?
Yes. Yes. It's part of the new enterprising Horsham strategy with.
But there is a world outside Horsham within our district. Rural areas need to be proper.
Yes.
And some of that has been impacted. I think the growth within some of those rural areas have been impacted. We need to get that growth back.
any other questions? Councillor Walters?
Sorry. The Horsham Enterprise Park, isn't that reliant on county doing their bit? How is this going to get measured then?
You're talking the old Novartis site, aren't you?
I am, yeah.
Yeah.
Which it would be nice if.
Just for everybody else around the table who might not be familiar with the terminology.
No, it would be nice if that was actually in brackets, but I just question how we're going to measure it.
I don't know. I'll have to.
I think we'll have to come back to you on that one, Belinda, because no one around the table seems to know at the moment.
Thank
So
you.
someone will come back to you on that one.
Thank you.
Also for clarification, Mowbray, for those who don't know, if I'm correct, is North Horsham, isn't it? Yeah. Just in case you didn't know. Any questions on this? No? Have you got any more for us?
Yeah. This one's just 2 slides. So always listening, learning and improving is fallen into governance. So we've got 4-year meetings, 4 area meetings with the parishes, community governance review of the parishes in the district, a corporate peer challenge, constitution, councillor development, and implement the redesigned pre-application advice service there. And then finally there's other items in the always listening, learning and improving theme, a resident survey, reviewing the key performance metrics, refreshing the asset management strategy, and a few more strategies there on land. Yeah, that's it.
Thanks, Sam. Any questions from councillors on those? I know there's a lot to take in there, but I mean, it just gives you a sighting shot at the sort of direction of travel, so to speak. I'm sure there'll be plenty of opportunities to question them later. Any questions? No. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Chairman. So the issue of fields in trust as a protection for Horsham Park is an issue that's been around for a few years now. The proposal that we're taking to Cabinet in a couple of weeks is that we progress conversations with fields in trust with an intention to develop a proposed deed of dedication, which is the document that creates the field in trust. And that is brought to Cabinet for their consideration. In doing that work, we will fully investigate the possibility to put the whole park into Fields in Trust. And if that's not possible, to look at other options for protecting the site. Horsham Park's quite a complex site. It developed over a number of years as predecessor councils purchased and were gifted land. And from a land registry perspective, there's a whole bunch of different patches of park with different types of protection, some with no protection. And the purpose from a community perspective is to provide certainty that the park is protected in perpetuity. I think from a management perspective at the moment, there is a covenant over a large part of the site that talks about the site being there for the Horsham community. And that's the approach that's been taken to managing the site. But from a Friends of Horsham Park perspective, that doesn't give them the certainty that they would expect. Fields in Trust essentially can sit a lot, I believe, on top of covenants. So whilst there's all sorts of different situations and protections for different parts of the park, the Fields in Trust deed of dedication can sit above that to provide that park-wide protection. Following on from the PDAG meeting a couple of weeks ago, last week, myself and some colleagues met with Fields in Trust alongside Friends of Horsham Park to try and unpick some of the issues and to try and better understand practically what happens once a site is a Field in Trust. I think the first thing they said to us is, ideally, once you've dedicated a site as a Field in Trust, you'll never talk to us again. So their aim isn't to actively manage or actively to control the site, but it is to provide that reassurance. And what they said to us is that we can do anything, or Horsham District Council or its successors can do anything to the park that is in line with the provision of recreation. So that means, for instance, we could build volleyball courts, we could build a 3G football pitch, we could build paddle tennis courts, we could create whatever we wanted in the park. If it's part of providing recreation, that will be allowed, and it doesn't need to go through a permission process with Fields in Trust. So I think from that perspective, it was reassuring that from a parks management perspective, we as officers, you as a council, can continue to manage the park in line with changing needs of society. One thing they said they don't want included in Fields in Trust is leased sites. So we spoke at the PDAG about the Rudgwick Fields in Trust site, and my understanding is that within the Rudgwick site, there's a number of leased buildings or sites leased to clubs, and that does create bureaucracy and administration, because whenever a lease is changed, it has to go through the Fields in Trust process, and there is cost involved in that. So what our proposal would be that no lease sites are included in Horsham Park for Fields in Trust purposes. So that would include the Bowls Club, Kaya, the rec rooms, leisure centre would be excluded. But everything that's grass, everything that's playground, pretty much everything within the footpath that goes around the park could be included without any significant impact. The PDAG also spoke about whether it's feasible to put more covenants on the park, and that would be an option. We could put more covenants on the park, but coming back to a Friends of Horsham Park perspective, a covenant wouldn't provide the security in the long term that they would desire. And I think, for me, if I look at it from an office perspective right now, we are protecting the park. But when I look at it from an external perspective, I understand where Friends of Horsham Park are coming from and looking at the site into the long term. So what we will do, subject to cabinet approval, is progress the discussions with Fields in Trust. We will develop, if we think it's feasible, develop a deed of dedication that will come back to Cabinet for their consideration. And alongside that, the report that goes to Cabinet next time round will have a more detailed analysis of other options. And it will have probably a very detailed legal analysis of what Fields and Trust practically means, and the impact on the council going forward. So the decision that Cabinet have been recommended to make now is yes, to proceed with the works, but whereas the original report delegated essentially to me and the Cabinet member to approve of deed of dedication for the site, that will be subject to member approval.
Thank you, Paul, for that update and filling in the gaps. Any questions from councillors? Councillor Bevis?
Thank you, Chairman. I just wonder whether there's anything in the park at the moment that is run by us that we might wish to lease to a third party to run on our behalf in future, and whether that would cause difficulties with this trust.
Potentially, yes. So if in the future we wanted to lease the tennis courts to a tennis club, if we wanted to build a volleyball or a netball court to be run by a netball club via a lease, then that would cause complexity.
All I can say is it will come back to over in scrutiny, I can rest assured. Councillor Walters? Councillor Vickers?
Very simple question. Any cost implications?
Nothing of note. There'll be officer resource time in terms of progressing the work and developing the deed of dedication, but there's no actual checks to be written.
Councillor Walters?
Thank you. Are you able to explain to us any concerns that have already been raised from any sort of body, either the Friends of Horsham Park or anybody else that's sort of had an interest in this? Or is it just literally within the council at the moment without that sort of, presumably it's not in the public domain?
It's in the public domain to the extent that the report's been on the website for the last week. We've been talking to Friends of Horsham Park for some time. They're fully supportive of the proposal and the way forward for this. I've not had any concerns from anywhere else other than within the membership of the council.
Does that answer your question, Belinda, or do you want to come back?
Oh, if I can come back, you say you talked to one of the other groups, one of the other community area that's already under this Fields and Trust system.
Roderick.
And what was their experience?
Well, Councillor Landeryu was at the PDAG, and so he was talking about his experience as I think a parish councillor, and he's in the room now, so it's probably not for me to talk for him.
Well, I'm sure, I mean, do you want to reply? Richard, you might want to use a mic, so you might want to come to the table next to Tony and... No.
Yeah, our experience in Roderick has been one that we've had another layer of bureaucracy laid upon us. And as was already said, that of course we have several buildings around our playing fields, and if you need to alter them or change of use, you need authority from Fields and Trust. That means almost like putting in another planning application, and that invariably ends up with more cost. Our tennis club, yes, we do lease the courts to the tennis club. They wanted to put up a small pavilion about the size of a garden summer house for their members. We had to get permission for that, and we also then had to draw up another lease, and that cost us about £1,300. About 20 years ago, before I was on the parish council, we had a very old, about 40, 50-year-old pavilion, which served for the cricket and footballers, for their changing rooms and teas and what have you, and showers. That was almost falling down. So we had the opportunity of building a brand new building, which would had showers and changing rooms, but also it was going to have a bar in it and be sort of like a clubhouse for the clubs, and also I think for residents. That was not allowed because it was not in the rules of Fields and Trust. So the only way we could get that built, we could have built the changing rooms and a cafe. That wouldn't have been a problem. And you can still do that in the park now if you wanted to. If the footballers needed a changing room nearer the football pitches, you could build one. And you don't have to go back to Fields and Trust to ask for it. But on this occasion, the only way we could get it built was if we exchanged a piece of land, the size of at least the size of the footprint of the building, with them. Then they would release that land for us to build on it. And we fortunately did have land, which I think you can see in the report, called Churchman's Meadow. We had to swap that from, and the whole thing cost an awful lot of money. Recently, the old pavilion I talked about, we gave that to the youth club. And recently the youth club, they've got a green living process going on where they're collecting about 15 different bins. They wanted a small change on that building to have a living roof to cover all these bins and a slight extension at the back. We had to go to Fields and Trust for that. Well, the parish council did. And they came back and said that a youth club was outside their terms of agreement. They've only been in there for 20 years, so I suppose we didn't think about it at the time. Anyway,
thanks, Richard. If you can wind up.
The youth club actually used the field probably more than anybody else anyway, because it's right on it, and they use it throughout the year, and the floodlights in the winter. So that was allowed to go on. Then the next thing was that we had an application. Well, they were looking to put electric charging points on the field car park. That has to go to Fields and Trust. So they didn't bother because it would have been probably more money. So those are the sort of experiences we've had. It is another layer of bureaucracy.
Thank you, Richard. So does that answer some
Very
of the questions?
comprehensive, and I very much welcome that. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks for updating the council. I mean, my only comment is, of course, Friends of Horsham Park are hardly a disinterested party, but fine. Any other questions on this topic? No? Thank you, Paul. You can stay if you want.
I'll stay.
Next item is crime and disorder annual update. To receive a report from Head of Housing or officers, I'd like to welcome Andrew Smith and also Mandy Cunningham. We've both waited patiently to join us and to update us. This is a briefing to update the committee on climate, on the climate and antisocial behavioural access across Horsham district. Covers the period 2023, I believe. Year with assessments of Sussex Police, etc. This record is basically a statutory requirement for the Crime and Disorder Bill, and we're asked at the end of this to note the report. And with those words, I will hand over to Andrew Smith and Mandy Cunningham. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. We've been speaking about sidekicks tonight, so I'm going to hand over to my sidekick, Mandy Cunningham, who has produced this report for us and will highlight some issues for you to think about, and then we can answer any questions that members may have. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mandy.
Thank you. So I won't go through the report in detail, but just highlight some sort of key points. So the data, if we look at section 2, the data, this is all police data, and it's taken from the annual strategic intelligence assessment. There's a county-wide one, which is signed off by the Safer West Sussex Partnership, which is an overarching county-wide community safety partnership. And then we've also got a one that's relative to Horsham, which is signed off by our own community safety partnership. The data is for last year, so you know we're kind of almost at the end of 2024, but this is for January to December 2023. So section 2 summarises the crime and disorder and antisocial behaviour figures for 2023 compared to the previous year, and also as a percentage of the West Sussex total. And you can see that those in green have those that are in green have decreased from last year. So that would be violence against the person, arson and criminal damage, public disorder, sexual offences and antisocial behaviour. Obviously that there will also be increases as well, and they are vehicle offences, robbery, theft, which I would say a lot of that is shoplifting, business crime, burglary and drug offences. It should be noted, though, that Horsham remains the second safest district in West Sussex after Mid Sussex, and it's only just a little bit above Mid Sussex, so it's almost the lowest. Looking at violent crime, so violent crime has decreased by 4% compared with last year. Horsham's got the second lowest rate of violence crime in the county. Serious violence accounts for 1.3% of all recorded crime. And we have a statutory duty to work with other partners to prevent and reduce serious violence. And locally, that's managed through the our own community safety partnership. And we also feed into the county-wide violence and exploitation reduction partnership. Moving on to sort of more sort of partnership work. And section 6, we talk about emerging issues. These are all being addressed. I mean, I won't list them all because you can see them there, but they're being addressed in partnership with Sussex Police and other partners where appropriate. That might be sort of businesses where business crime is affected through the Business Crime Reduction Partnership. It might be with registered social landlords on things like neighbourhood disputes and that sort of thing. Going on to section 8, the Community Safety Partnership. So this was reviewed this year. I know that the data relates to last year, but the Community Safety Partnership was, we had a review this year. Community Safety Partnerships are a statutory duty for responsible partners, of which we are one. And we have agreed on 4 priorities this year, and this is all based on data. So it's all on evidential data. I've listed those. So that's safety in public spaces with a focus on hotspots of concern, neighbourhood disputes, which is largely managed by our antisocial behaviour team in partnership again with police and other other partners. Business crime, which is delivered through the Business Crime Reduction Partnership, and community cohesion as well, which we feel is important because that's very much around a preventative measure in sort of stopping some of the issues starting in the first place. I just wanted to quickly mention some of our early interventions and prevention and education work as well at section 10. It's important that we do a lot of the early intervention and prevention work because, again, it stops issues from escalating. 10.1 just provides some information in some of the early interventions that we considered. We're considering for young people that are getting involved in antisocial behaviour that might be becoming exploited by other people, and to educate them into getting back onto the right track. So there's Reboot, which is a police-led initiative, which has been going for a few years now, which is a 4-stage early intervention. We do some direct work with schools and peer group work, where this is when there are groups of individuals that become known to us and the police on antisocial behaviour, and we do some interventions with those groups of people in schools at an early stage. We've also got the ripple effect, which is a knife crime intervention. So that's around sort of raising awareness, education, and they use a virtual reality headset as well. So these and that's sort of around young people who may be at risk of exploitation and habitual knife carriers. And we've also got a new intervention which we're just starting on shoplifting, which is around raising awareness of the impact of how, you know, of their crime when young people are shoplifting, and it's an opportunity to reflect on their behaviour. And we've actually got some sound bites. We've recorded some sound bites from local businesses so that they can see how sort of it's affected local businesses. We've also got some prevention and education initiatives as well, which I've listed sort of at 10.2. That's around sort of some courses for parents around sort of when their kids become teenagers, and we go into schools when they're when the children go from primary to secondary school. So it's sort of we've just delivered a few in September, October. So year 7 children that we invite the parents in the evening and just talk about sort of sort of the things that they might face. We have a community safety focus as well, and it's not to frighten them, it's to educate them. We also do detached work across the district in partnership with local organisations as well, such as the For the Youth, which take the snack wagon out, and that provides a reassuring presence for young people and engaging with young people. And I think when there are responsible adults out there, it does actually have an effect in reducing antisocial behaviour. I also wanted to mention the neighbourly networks as well, because this kind of fits with our community cohesion. And we've started a pilot in Mowbray to increase community cohesion. Want it to be very much bottom-up led. There's still a little bit more work to be doing on that, but we do want to kind of do more of that across the district, and we'll be working with local communities to do that over the next year or so. I would also say that the wardens have a big role to play in all of this as well, not just on community safety, but communities generally, in helping vulnerable people and bringing communities together as well. That's kind of it in a nutshell, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? I'm sure there are some. I'll start off with Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I have a question on neighbourhood wardens. I'm convinced of their benefits. However, their implementation, as I understand it, is through parish council. So we as district councillors may see a benefit of neighbourhood wardens in a certain parish, but if a certain parish is resistant and doesn't want it for whatever reason, is that the end of the story as far as rollout of neighbourhood wardens is?
I mean, we can always have conversations with the parish councils, and I know that I think Councillor Livingston, I think you're speaking to your parish colleagues as well. At the end of the day, although they're funded by although they're employed by Horsham District Council, they are funded by the parish council. Any new schemes, we've got a little bit of a reserve budget, so we could consider perhaps contributing to that, just a bit of pump priming for any new schemes, but that budget is limited, so we won't be able to do that for everybody.
Yeah, that reserves.
I think on that comment, I think on that comment of limited funds, I saw a shaking head over here, so I'm not quite sure about that. Didn't see that. Any other questions? Sorry, Bill, Councillor Walters.
Thank you, Chair. It's one of presentation. In the job that I do, I'm aware that colour blindness is quite an issue, and red and green is particularly. You couldn't see the red and green. I apologise. I can, but a lot of gentlemen do struggle with colour blindness. So would you mind working around that? Yeah, of course. Something else in the presentation. Thank you.
Raises the point about KPIs, doesn't it? Councillor Livingston.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting my parish councillors together. Now, It's going to be quite an odd arrangement because I think it's going to end up with 4 parish councils, rural parish councils coming together. And one of your wardens has agreed to actually come along, which I'm very pleased with. But it's like herding cats to get these people to agree on a date, then a location. So bear with me. I am still working on this. Okay, thank you.
That's fine. I should add that we do have Stenning, Upper Beeding and Bramber as a scheme. So there is a similar scheme. It might be worth if they wanted to have conversations with one of the parishes there, probably Stenning because they're the main parish. But that is one scheme with 3 separate parishes that contribute towards that. And obviously that will have an effect on their costs as well because they're sharing it.
And that's going to be very important because get the cost right. Thank you.
If I can chip in before moving on to the next question, from a practical point of view, having set up a neighbourhood warden scheme as a parish council finance chairman and a parish council, the financing of it needs a lot of thought, and how one works it on the precept can take some time and use of financial reserves if the relevant parish council has got financial reserves to cushion the increase in the precept. So that will be a discussion, Dennis, that you're going to have to the parish is going to have to think about very carefully, because it took us 3 to 4 years to build up the precept in an acceptable manner, cushioning it, so to speak, to make it possible, because our wardens cost north of 70,000. So it's not an easy one. And of course, getting parish councils to share anything is like, well, 2 parish councils is exponentially much bigger. 4 is, well, I'll leave it to you. But what is it? If you want any practical stuff, just come and speak to me. I'm quite happy to help. Right?
I appreciate your advice. I will possibly come back to you. Thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I had a question for you, like the excellent initiatives you mentioned, take on, for example, growing teenage and understanding teenage age. Do you have to go into the majority of all schools, or is it just on what percentage of our teenagers be exposed to that particular street?
It's so those are for the parents. I think we're delivering to the most, if not all, of the secondary schools. So it's not the primaries, it's the secondary schools, and it's when the children go into year 7. But yeah, I would say most, if not all of them. Yeah, it's been a busy time for the year for the team.
There is resource to tackle most.
Yeah. Those that are aware of, I mean, I'll mention that the peer group work, because the peer group work in schools, which is one of the early interventions, and this is when sort of young people come to notice, they are identified through we run peer group conferences, and if you'll see on page 1 of my report in the summary, it gives a list of quite a lot of the forums and meetings that we either attend or run. The peer group conference is one that we run, and that's when young people come to our attention, and it could be through the schools, it could be through the police, it could be through West Sussex County Council, and we will have a discussion around those young people, and then it may be decided that actually there's sort of 3 or 4 young people in one particular school, let's do some intervention work there.
Any other questions from councillors? No, I've got 2 comments, 2 questions, just for a change. I mean, in my simplistic manner, I was looking at table 2.2, which basically in the preamble, you said Horsham district account for 17% of West Sussex population. In my simplistic manner, I just looked down the markers there, and they were all under 17% except for 1. So I thought that's pretty good news. I was quite surprised that 18% for vehicle offences. I don't expect an explanation. I'm just commenting. Don't worry.
An explanation for you.
The question I've got is in 3.4, for example, several times you said sexual offences and was the 3rd lowest in West Sussex, 4th lowest in the county. My question is 3rd lowest or 4th lowest in how many?
7. So fourth lowest would be kind of in the middle, really, wouldn't it?
Okay, fine, no, I just want to know
Yeah.
what your, what's the word? Gamut is, or you
Yeah,
know,
we're
what
breaking
span
it down.
is.
Yeah, we're breaking it down between the district and borough councils there.
But 7 is in total, thank you. That helps put it into context. The other question I've got is, when you're talking about business crime reduction partnership, and you're talking, I mean, very topical at the moment is shoplifting, and it's all over the news and all the rest of it. And the question for me is, and then you've got early interventions further down about shoplifting intervention. You say about DISC, an online secure platform for information sharing. Does any of this information get fed back to shopkeepers saying you've got to be careful because you've got a sort of a shoplifting gang in your area? Or is it just kept for the police and secure? I mean, is there any feedback to local shops? Is where I'm going with that question.
Yeah, I think what we would do where there's good news stories, so DISC, it's a platform where businesses can report in and businesses can share information with each other.
Okay.
So other businesses will see sort of nominals, perhaps photographs of nominals, and quite a lot of people have been positively identified as a result of DISC. But there is also a sort of a weekly newsletter that comes out, and we do encourage, I mean, the police can bring in good news stories, but if there are any sort of any good news to report, then we want to encourage that as much as possible as well. DISC has been going sort of probably for the best part of just over a year or so, and sometimes when people go through the criminal justice system, I'm saying it's a year, but that, you know, people that were probably arrested a year ago may still be kind of going through that process, because sometimes, you know, there are delays in the court system. So I would say it's early days, but yeah, further down the line, we would expect some sort of good news stories and some positive feedback to come back, and for that to be reported on DISC to the members.
It's reassuring that the data and information is shared, because my concern was, having observed the way neighbourhood wardens operate and the Sussex police, information is fed upwards and it sort of disappears into the stratosphere, and nobody ever knows what happens, and there's no feedback coming down the other way, which was a bit of a shame. And I'm glad that to be reassured that in this particular case, like shoplifting, there is flow of information amongst the community. So thank you for that. My final comment is under item public service, this public spaces protection order. So we've decided not to continue with the PSPO, fine. The notices are still up, so it'd be a good idea to remove them, I think.
I believe they're all down now.
I'll
If
go
you
and-
see any
I'll go and
up,
check.
could you let me know?
I'll
Because
do
we
that.
will remove them.
Because I saw some recently, because
Okay.
I questioned PSPOs recently with Paul Anderson. So, okay, thank you. So I'll come back to questions and open it. Belinda, you had a question?
I have two. Would it be possible on your table under 2.2 to, and I don't know whether this is possible, to note how many of the perpetrators are not Horsham residents? Because I'm aware that I wouldn't have that information. That could, yeah. No, I'm not asking who, it's the numbers. That's not something that is reported through the strategic intelligence assessment. Right. So I wouldn't have that information. Sorry.
Okay. It's just I'm aware that a significant number of the recent incidents are involving people coming into the area from outside. And if you're doing work in the school and some of the, you know, the other wonderful initiatives you're doing, it's like we're sort of perceiving a problem which may be bigger than it is, and there's a lot of resources going into this, when actually the perpetrators are coming from outside, or at least the perpetrators of some of the more what I would call horrendous crimes.
Yeah.
So that's question one.
It's a question that I can take back to the police, but I can't promise that
I think it would be anecdotal after the event.
Yes.
You know, if, you know, in a year's time, you might be able to say, well, in 24 of these figures that we know here, a percentage of them were from outside. Second point is the disc scheme. Is it across towns or is it just within like Horsham town? Does it go?
It's the whole district, and you can break it down. So there are a number of sub-administrators who are mostly HDC staff and police. And you can break that down. So I can break that down between different villages. I can see sort of how many businesses have signed up in Storrington, for example.
I'm aware that it works very well in the town, but I'm wondering whether if, for instance, some people perpetrated shoplifting, if you like, were then moved on, whether there was a warning for the other towns, so something all the towns down in the bus routes, for instance.
Well, we would have that information. So where there are nominals, so what the known people that are on there, and as reports come in, we will be able to see that information. Perhaps if you were a business in Stenning, for example, you may just see the Stenning information, but there are the sub-administrators and perhaps sort of businesses that sort of cover a wider area that would see more than that.
I think Councillor Trollope.
Thank you, Chair. Have you had any sort of feedback directly from the wardens themselves about how they feel, about how effective they are? I remember about a year ago, I spent 2 evenings with the wardens in Billingshurst. And they talked a lot about the frustration of just not being able, you know, they can observe things, they can see things, but they didn't always feel like they had the most constructive relationship with the police. They weren't asking for arrest powers, but they were, you know, they were frustrated. There's not, all they can do is talk to the people, and make reports, and that's literally the extent of their powers. And I did sense a bit of a frustration on their end, and I just wonder if there are things that they could be empowered with that would make them more effective.
The warden should be having a good working relationship with the PCSOs in their areas. Obviously the PCSOs are stretched and they don't necessarily just work in that one village, for example. But you know, where there are frustrations, I do encourage them to reach out to their PCSOs and just sort of maybe have regular meetings and things like that, just to build up that working relationship. Because I think once you've got that working relationship, things will work a bit better. And I think there maybe have been sort of 1 or 2 sticking points in sort of 1 or 2 areas.
Yeah, and similarly, sort of similarly, I spent quite a few number of hours with the paid guard in the Sainsbury's in Billingshurst, and actually during the time there were 2 incidences of shoplifting. And again, I don't quite know why they hire the guards, because they can't do anything. They can't stop them walking out the door. They can't challenge them. There's, you know, they can just sit there and be sort of like a presence. But again, one does wonder that, you know, not suggesting that they have arresting powers, but they have. I don't know if there's any way of looking at how they can be made more effective in addressing the shoplifting rather than just being a visible presence.
I'm not aware of that particular issue, but that's something that I would encourage them to raise with us and the police around sort of how we address that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Jeffrey?
Thank you, Chair. Just 2 really quick points. First one on DISC. It's a fantastic initiative, especially with the information sharing. It's a really game-changing piece of kit. So in regard to that, are we actively still advertising this, especially to new businesses in the district who may not be aware of it, to keep the uptake going? And point 2 comes back to a point earlier made by Councillor Walters, where it was stated where a lot of the incidents with people are coming from outside of the district potentially. So are we working as closely as we can be with our neighbours, such as in Crawley, for example, to deliver these schemes in schools and early intervention with young people in order to try and catch it before it becomes a real problem on the streets? Thank you.
Okay. Your first question, yes, we will continue to promote it. And we've got, so our wardens continue to promote it. The PCSOs will promote it. And of course, we've got our bid ambassadors as well in Horsham Town who are very much involved in this piece of work as well. Sorry, can you remind me of your second question again?
No, of course. It was just coming back to Councillor Walter's point earlier, where the point was made that with some of the crime statistics in the district being committed by people not necessarily living in the district itself. Obviously, we're not parlayed to that information. That's the GDPR aspects of it. But my point is, are we working as closely as we could be with our neighbours, local authority neighbours, to deliver these excellent schemes that are coming out and the good work that's being done to make sure when it's being delivered, it's actually having the effect that it should be across the board, especially if you've got people travelling in between districts and local authorities to try and nip it in the bud before it becomes a real problem and the problem is moved elsewhere, essentially, is my point.
Okay, I would say our interventions are largely based on Horsham residents, but of course the police have got sort of wider actions, that they're sort of Sussex police. So, you know, we would work with Crawley police, for example, where there are Crawley nominals, and where there are sort of, you know, ongoing issues where this was an high level perpetrators, I would say, you know, we would do things like banning orders and things like that to stop them with the police. I mean, not Horsham District Council, but in partnership, you know, there would be banning orders to stop sort of nominals from other areas where there was this persistent sort of criminal activity taking place from entering the district or certain parts of the district.
No, that's perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions? No. I think it's worth flagging in because it's been raised with me as well. The question of the warden's powers and what the wardens can and can't do. My question really is, the wardens were set up quite some time ago with a model that was agreed quite some time ago. Have we ever looked at that model again and revisited the model as to what they can and can't do and considered it? If the answer is yes, when was it? And if the answer is no, shouldn't we be doing that?
Are you talking about the powers in the PSPO or more generally? Because they still have powers on things like littering and issuing fixed penalty notices. There are, I mean, it was before I joined the council, but when the PSPO lapsed, there was a piece of work around other powers that can be used, not necessarily by the wardens, but it could be the antisocial behaviour team, it could be Sussex Police. So, for example, some of those powers that were in the PCO are crimes that should have been dealt with by the police anyway. There are others where we've got other powers, so we could issue things like community protection warnings and community protection notices. So we did have a look at the sort of whole range of powers and think, okay, well, how else can this be delivered? I say we, it wasn't me because I wasn't here, but you know, I would have been part of, you know, I think that was the right thing to do.
No, I fully agree. Oh, sorry.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I mean, as far as I know, we've not revisited the model, and I've only been sort of back at Horsham for a year. I think it could be something we would look at. I just wanted to come back, if I may, Chairman, to Councillor Jeffrey's point about working with our sort of neighbouring authorities. So Crawley, headed up, I think, by Councillor Frank, did arrange a session at the Horth for young people on various issues that were affecting them, crime, gangs, sort of drugs, and that kind of thing. Two of our officers went to those meetings to see how that could be translated into Horsham District. We actually met this afternoon to discuss that. Just as you all know, the borough and the district, Crawley and Horsham, are very different. And so because our schools are much more dispersed, there's much more rural, we wouldn't be able to operate the same kind of model of event that Crawley, it wouldn't work. But our team have learned from that, and the interventions that we're doing, particularly the ripple effect on knife crime, which has been delivered to all of our schools. So we've got to work out how we can deliver the right messages, set up the right engagement with our schools throughout the district. I doubt we'd ever bring them all together. I don't think that would work. It's far more looking at those schools and looking at what interventions we can do, what we can because the ripple effect is run by SID the Youth. Is that Mandy? SID Youth. So it's looking at how we can meet the same kind of needs, but in a Horsham context. So that is something we are considering. The wardens are very interesting, Chairman, because some of them don't want to exercise powers because they want to build a relationship, particularly with the young people, so that they are not seen as enforcers, but of those that the younger people and others can sort of come to, and they can intervene early without wielding the stick of authority. Now, I don't have time, but I could give you a number of examples of where that has worked really well. So it is something I think we do need to look at, is the model of the ward. They do operate very, very differently in the different aspects in the different areas of the district. We get a WWDTW email every week from the wardens, and they highlight what they've done. And a number of us get that. And the range of activities and interventions that they do is quite phenomenal. And so that's just worth remembering, that how they operate in different ways. And a lot of it's down to character and personality, but I would say it's an incredibly effective scheme. But it would do no harm to look at the model again, particularly if we're hoping that more parishes will take it up.
I wasn't thinking about sticking carrot with young people. I was thinking with, across the board, actually, because a lot of the problems are not actually young people. It's, how can I put it, more pseudo mature people. I'll put it that way. We should be more mature, but aren't. So I thank you for. I think it would be valuable to revisit the model and just check it. I mean, it might not be broke and therefore doesn't need fixing, but it's worth talking to the wardens, I think, and getting an idea of it. Any other questions on this topic from members? No? Well, thank you both for coming. You're quite welcome to stay, but if you'd rather go, it's fine by me. I perfectly understand. But thank you very much for your presentation and spending your time with us. So at this point in time, we've been given this report. So I would look for a proposer and a seconder to note the report so that we can formalize the process. So can I have a proposer and a seconder? Councillor Taylor proposing, Councillor Vickers seconding. Can I have a show of hands to endorse? Thank you very much. Okay. Item 11, building control fees. The reason why I wanted this to come to our committee is not to do with decision making or anything. It's more of an unusual, well, not unusual, but one of information really, and update you so that the head of development can also update you with some of the issues on building control, which sort of comes into this. The building control fees reflect in part some of the issues to do with this service of the council, which has got problems. Particularly if you look at recommendations for item 2, essentially, we need to be able to provide this service, but what you may not know, and I'm sure Emma will correct me if I've got this wrong, is that we've lost the majority, if not all, of our senior inspectors, and that we're trying to recruit new ones. So you need to be aware of that. But this presents a massive problem because of the disparity between salaries of the public sector and the private sector. But I won't go into that. I'll just hand over to Emma Parks to update us on this, but she's also in a position to answer questions over the problems that I've highlighted to you, which I am privy to. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. A good introduction. So in summary, the proposal is to put up the build control fees by around 15 to 20%, and we want to do that ahead of budget setting and implement them in January. And the reasons for that are building control has gone through and continues to go through a significant period of change. Following Grenfell, there's been significant changes in legislation around the requirements of building legislation, but also in terms of the officers themselves, the surveyors, and the process they need to go through to demonstrate their competence to continue to operate. So the process essentially is they need to go through exams and interviews and things like that to demonstrate at what level they can work at in order to continue to do their job. This has resulted in a national significant shortage of building control inspectors because many have left the profession or changed profession, which has meant that, you know, it's been very difficult to retain individuals who have gone through this very rigorous process and have managed to demonstrate their competence at the highest level. We did have 4 surveyors at that highest level. By December, we will have none because they've all left. They've left to work for approved inspectors or London or Surrey authorities, which obviously command a much higher wage. And we are now reliant on some temporary staff and are seeking to recruit, but obviously that is a significant challenge. Building control is a statutory function, so there are matters we still need to continue to operate. It does work in a competitive market, so for some elements of the service there is an alternative. They can go to what's called an approved inspector, but it continues to be challenging. Also at the same time, there's new national KPIs that have been introduced, and we will need to be externally audited, and we will actually have to pay for that as well. Brighton have just been told they're going to have to pay £14,000 for the privilege of being externally audited. Also, there's significant cost in the surveyors going through that process. So once they've demonstrated their competence, they have to pay for basically every step of the way. They have to pay to even stay on the register, and then they have to do it every 4 years. So there's a lot of significant cost involved in that, which is why, given that catalogue of matters, we wish to put the fees up now. The amount we're proposing to put them up is comparative to what some of our neighbours have already done or are in the process of doing, and we have benchmarked that. What I would say though is we need to continue to work on what building control looks like going forward. We are in the process of removing our service to Crawley because we simply can't resource it anymore. We've been carrying out Crawley building control since 2006, but we just don't have the resource to do so. So there is a whole piece of work to do around costs and what that service looks like going forward. But in order to we can move forward in a better position, we want to put forward this proposal to increase fees now, and then there will follow a more comprehensive piece of work, which, you know, may well come to you going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma, for the comprehensive presentation. Any questions from councillors? Councillor Grant?
Emma, thanks for really good overview, really interesting as well on state building control in HDC. Question for you on the current situation. Obviously you say you're resource light on building control right now. How's that impacting current projects? Or is it the case that the client, if that's the right word, just goes elsewhere to one of the approved inspectors?
So once they've started the work and they're using us essentially, but they need to continue to use us. Obviously, if they haven't started that work, they have a choice as to whether they use us or go to approved inspector. That's of course if they haven't started the work. If they start the work, if it's retrospective, they have to come to us. That's the statutory process. But you know, I think my view at the moment, and what I would say is it's evolving by the day in terms of what resource we have left, is that we will continue to be able to operate a service and continue those projects within Horsham district, with a view obviously that we hand back the service to Crawley, and then they would have to find their own resource to manage those projects going forward.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Trollope, I think.
Yeah. Thank you, Emma. What is the difference between the salary that, you know, London salary and what we were able to offer for a senior? I mean, is it Is it like a 15, 20, 30K difference, or is it, is it something? I mean, I know in IT that the difference in salaries in IT can be quite significant between London and non-London. I'm just curious as to whether or not it's the same sort of delta in salary.
I'm aware of some of the salaries. I won't say what the exact ones are, but they are looking at doubling their salaries. Yes.
That gives you a perspective of the
I think
problem.
I might retrain as a building inspector.
Yes, I think that's a good idea.
Councillor Livingston?
My question was going to be similar to John's. Are we actively advertising for new building control inspectors?
So there's a number of streams of work going on at the moment, Councillor Livingstone. So one of them is we've secured some temporary support who started last week. So if you're familiar with the class and categories, he's class 2F, which covers most development in the district. We don't have any high-rise buildings above 18 metres. And I think, hopefully they'll stay for a little while we sort ourselves out. Also in the process, and it going to the Hay panel on the 14th, is a non-technical manager for the team. So not a qualified surveyor, but somebody who has a level of technical knowledge and who can manage the surveyors and can lead on helping to shape the service going forward. So that's in place. We aren't out to advert for a surveyor at the moment because there's a piece of work going on in terms of market supplements and retention payments. To review that. So it is the intention to go out to advert, but we need to complete that piece of work before we do.
Okay, thank you.
That answers your questions. Any other questions from anybody?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Emma, for the information on this. Is really helpful. We're looking at obviously the fees and everything else involved. I mean, and you just mentioned, a lot of these staff are leaving to double their salaries, was mentioned. So when we do come to recruitment, how are we actually going to incentivize people to come and work for us if they can still look at doubling, tripling their salary elsewhere? What's the incentive that we can use to get those people in the door? Because at the end of the day, you still need that level of competency that you're looking for in order to fulfill our obligations. Thank you.
It's very challenging and I don't have all the answers. We do have a number of trainees who the local authority building control fund 1, who's placed with us. We're funding 2 and they're moving forward. I think it's a bubble that will burst at some point. Obviously, we need to see what the outcome of Grenfell is. It talks about some kind of public body for building control. We need to see. I think government are becoming more aware of the issue, and there is a group that's set up which Barbara Childs chairs with all directors across most directors across Sussex, and that will also be a lobbying tool for the issues. But we simply can't compete with those type of salaries because it's director level via pay. What we can provide something, and obviously we need to look at what we can provide, flexibility close to home. There are other elements that we can provide which will be the focus, but in terms of baseline salary, we are not going to be able to compete with an approved inspector in London.
Not as things stand. Any other questions? No, I think my only comment would be is if you look in Appendix D, I think it is, that actually the building control financial summary is still negative and will be negative, just for what it's worth. No other comments, questions on this one? Councillor Grant?
Just a question, just for clarification. So building control is a statutory function, so whatever happens, and correct me, this isn't a question, I might be phrasing it as a statement. So it's a statutory provision we have to do, but yet we're competing against a private sector of authorised inspectors, approved inspectors. So just because I want to know, at what point does HDC building control have to be is compelled on a project, or are you just competing for business in an open market? Sorry if that's a silly question, but
no, it's not a silly question, and it is a complex model, which may or may not change post the Grenfell inquiry report. So there are a number of elements where somebody has to use us, like if it's retrospective or if it's enforcement matters and things like that, where we have to do it. Everything else, people can choose to use us or not, but if they submit it to us, we have a statutory duty to determine it. So it's slightly complex, but you know, I think if push comes to shove, if we really don't have the resources, the message will be, yes, you can submit it to us, but we cannot resource it, so you may not wish to. The issue with that is then we don't get the income, so it's a catch-22.
Does that help, Nick? Yeah.
Oh no, I was just making, I wonder if you could do like a central pool of different district councils of building and try and feed off them or something.
That's on the table, but what I would, and that has been discussed, because I said there is this Sussex-wide group. I think there isn't the appetite within West Sussex to do that. But what we are looking at doing is having things like shared level agreement, so we can, whilst it won't be a shared service, we can draw resources much more easily across different districts and boroughs.
Thank you, Emma. Any other questions for Emma? No? We'll move on to item 12, which is going to be fielded by Emma as well. It's